So I was asked to do by a subscriber to do a video on Starlink, which I'm happy to do. I haven't done one. I think there was a recording of me doing a presentation at an event on Starlink, but I haven't really done my own Starlink video. And the reason for that is there's so many of them out there. I didn't think anybody'd be interested, but I was asked, so I'll do it. I've had Starlink since January of last year, so it was actually delivered to me out here in Quartzsite, Arizona. I have the roaming feature, which cost me a total of $135 per month. And also, I think the equipment cost me just under $600 at the time. It may be a little bit more than that at this point. I know there are data caps of a gigabyte a month starting in February, where you're slowed down from priority status. But you know, if you're an Rv'er, that won't matter to you because you'll be roaming like I am, and when you're roaming from your home base, you're deprioritized full-time anyway, so the data cap is meaningless. The only time it's meaningful is if you have residential service and you're at your registered address. And it just so happens for me, because I knew how tough things would be in January, my registered address has been here in Quartzsite, Arizona, for a long time, because I wanted that priority access, especially during the month of January here, when there were going to be a lot of competition from other Rv'ers that have Starlink that are portable. But I've had the unit in North Idaho, South Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, California, and Arizona, and under a variety of circumstances. And I found the service to be very reliable. Even in Idaho, where I had obstructions, I had a lot of tree cover and I could not get a clear view. And I did have certainly a great deal of downtime where I wouldn't get service frequently at the beginning of the summer. But as they added satellites, that got greater and greater. I think when I started, I was getting about 50 to 55 minutes of obstructions where I didn't get service every 12 hours. And by the time I left, it was less than 10 minutes. So there was a great deal of improvement, even in a place where there were trees and I couldn't get a clear view. Now, in every other area, I've had a clear view of the sky and with no obstructions, and it's been more than adequate for my needs for doing streaming, and mostly for my Zoom calls. Now, my Zoom calls and video chatting is it's really critical that I not have interruptions. So I use other services in addition to Starlink. I have an unlimited AT&T SIM card, and I have a 100 gigabyte T-Mobile card, and I use those. I bind the signals together on software on my PC to make sure I don't have interruptions, because Starlink, even when it's operating well, it's got half a second to 1 second outages pretty frequently, and that can make your high definition video call not so good. But when I bind it with another service, it's fine. Now, as far as if you want to stream Netflix or any other service, those outages make no difference. You won't even see them. So for the purposes, and even casual video conferencing, it's not going to make a difference. I'm a therapist, and the video conferencing that I have can be really critical, and you don't want to like freeze like that at a critical moment. when you're working with a client. So I pay that extra money. But if you're a nomad and you want to do occasional video conferencing, you want to download things, you want to stream, you want to surf the web, and you want to be able to do it literally anywhere, even in places that are remote and don't have cell service, then I highly recommend Starlink. Now, you are going to watch videos where people say, their Starlink is unusable between like 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. during peak hours. And I've not had that experience. It slows down. Yeah, it absolutely slows down. I'd say it slows down when it's really congested to 20 megs down, and it's usually over 100. But at 20, my streaming and everything else is just fine. Now, there was one night where it was, I would say, unusable, but I don't think it was congestion. I did a reboot of the system, and then it was fine. So it was some problem with the hardware or software. It wasn't congestion. So I'm a big supporter of Starlink. I believe that it's just going to get better and better as they launch more and more satellites. So you probably want to see what I do with the hardware. One of the specific questions the woman who asked me to do this had is, what do you do with your Starlink? So I'm going to come around here, and I'm going to switch this over. Here's it. Well, you can see here the Starlink is mounted on a pole. It's actually a painter's pole that is attached to the ladder on my rig, and Starlink sells an attachment that goes on the top of the pole, and Starlink snaps onto that. So this is how I do it when I'm going to be at a location for more than a few days. This is a stand that comes standard with the Starlink package, and the whole thing just sits in this hole here, and you can set this on the ground pretty much anywhere, and that's what I do when I'm only staying a day or two. She also asked me, what do you do with the cord and everything? And I said, well, it's nothing too fancy, because basically what you see here is this is the Starlink cord going to the dish, and it goes up through a hole in here into the inside of my trailer. And you see I kind of use the same theory with my solar panel cords. So when I put this down, I do not completely close that cabinet door, so it's not very fancy. So the Starlink cord, it actually comes through up in a hole right there, and it's kind of tied to a couple other lines here. Goes up and over the threshold, and right here, this white thing is the Starlink router. So that's pretty much how I use Starlink. And if you have any specific questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll answer them as best I can.